We meet again.
We meet again. Let me all just welcome us to arrive in this space together. We have a new month starting in December, and we have some new things to explore this month. So before we get started, I would like to just invite all of you, those of you that are listening, those of you that are watching, those of you that are present here with us right now, to just look around the space that you're in. What do you notice? Are you in a safe space? Do you feel comfortable? How's your breathing? Don't have to change it, just notice it. Notice how it's moving in and out of your body. And chances are, if you're sitting here with us right now, your heart's beating. So check on the needs being met in this moment. And hopefully, in that look around, you noticed that you're in a safe space. Everything that we are going to explore, play with, talk about today could feel a little unsafe at times, but we just need to remember, look around, notice we're breathing, our hearts are beating, and we are in a safe space. And whenever we need to, we can pause life. We can hit pause on this if it feels like it's too much. We can go for a walk, take a timeout. Timeouts can be a good thing, right? Give ourselves a chance to remind ourselves, I am breathing. Oxygen is moving in and out of this body. My heart is beating. And unless I am being chased by a saber-toothed tiger right now, I am safe. So, welcome everybody. Let's take a nice, delicious breath together. Brenda, are you kicking us off today?
I am kicking us off today. So we thought about it and thought this might be a good month to talk about spirituality and religion. And I think this week we're going to start off about some major differences between the two. And I've got a little bit of an outline of things I want to talk about as topics, and I would love to hear each of your perspectives. Could be from your childhood, could be from your adulthood, could be from people you know or your parents' experience. It doesn't matter. It's just all about sharing that. I want to start off by saying, though, that somebody can be both religious and spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
Some people can be totally religious, working within the dictates of the organized religion you choose to believe, and then no connection to spirituality whatsoever, except by what the books allow you to be. And then somebody, and I'll be honest and say like myself, who is more into spirituality as a personal experience, and I want no connection to organized religion. And all of those things are fine as long as that's what resonates with your inner soul, right? There's no right or wrong in anything. And I just wanted to bring out, number one, I need some healing in this area myself. So I wanted to bring up some topics for us to chat about and see if, I'm the only one with this experience, which is entirely possible, or if you all have other experiences to bring in to the conversation. So what I want to say first is that I looked up some definitions, and some of the definitions are like, I really don't feel the definitions myself. But the major difference definition-wise, religion is a group of organized beliefs shared amongst a group of people who believe the same.
Yep.
And that's usually what an organized religion is. You all walk in, you all have the same beliefs, or you purport to have the same beliefs, and you're agreeing to live by the dictates of the organization. That's usually what religion is. Spirituality, to me, on the other hand, and I'll ask you for your perspectives as well, is a personal experience of my beliefs, my morals, what I choose to believe, what works for me, which might be the same as other people, either this group, an organized religion, or me, myself, and I, and that's entirely it. Yeah, and it's totally independent, and it can combine things from organized religions. It can combine things that are metaphysical. It can combine things that are, spaghetti monsters. It's totally whatever, whatever speaks to you. So I'll start out by saying, in my life, I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness as a child. Stopped attending when I was a teenager. Stopped participating probably earlier than that. But then after that, I had a gap in my soul. Didn't realize that that's what it was, but wanting to belong to something, wanting to believe in something, because that's the way I'd been raised, was to have an outside source that guided my life and what I did and what I said and how I behaved. In my mid-20s, I explored being a non-denominational Christian and thought that was going to fill it, because that purported to have an individual relationship with God. And I thought I didn't want anything the organization had to say. I just wanted to understand how to develop this, how to fill that void, how to fill that hole. And that felt phony to me. That didn't, I tried to do it in good faith. I tried to do it, and it just didn't speak to me. So I sat for years with this hole of, what's going to fill this spot that I don't believe the other things? What's going to fill this spot? And it's only become recently, the past couple of years, where I've discovered, my inner being, my soul, trying to understand who I am and what I believe and what works for me. And that's still a path I'm on. And I just want to say that up front. I don't have any bad feelings about anything or anyone, or what anybody chooses to believe or not to believe. So I'll start and say, Erin, what's your experience been?
My mom was Catholic growing up, and then I think my dad was Baptist. And I remember stories of my mom saying that in order for them to get married, I'm probably zero religious. So these are stories that I've been told. I don't know if they're factual or how it works, but my dad had to convert or something of that sort in order to get married into the church. And I remember when my mom told me that, because I've always had the thought, religion is like love for God or love for whoever you believe in. And we don't have to conform to be accepted. And so when they got married, I don't know what ended up happening, but then we started going to, what you said, a non-denominational church. And it was very much like Wednesday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night. And I guess I was maybe 10 or 11 when I guess my parents had found out that the preacher, pastor, I don't know what they're called, had been acting inappropriately with one of his staff members. And I think at that time he was married and he had children. And I think at that time my parents just decided, no more. And since then, I'm 41 now, so 30 plus years, I haven't gone to church. And I've just always had, your definitions that you had, I've always said I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. I've always kind of believed we're all humans. We shouldn't have to be in a box and, and I kind of joke of when I'm the same person every 7 days of the week, not just on Sunday. And so growing up, I really didn't have that. From 10 on, right? I didn't have those, even with talking with you and some other people, that can be very, when we're breaking patterns or we're changing who we are being. I don't want to say that hasn't been an obstacle for me, but that isn't one of the things that those ties, right? They could be so strong, I think, in some people of having to change. And so, yeah, I joke when I say heathen and all of these things, but it's just I'm just a person who has my beliefs. And I've always had this idea, thought, ask me the question and I'll give you my answer. It's not this is a belief, and so I believe this way, or this is the group and I believe this way, whether it's, political or it's religious or whatever. And so, yeah, we've never done, and Jason, I guess, was raised Catholic, but I haven't gone to church, 30 plus years. And I think it just, for me, it's like, who are we every single day of our life, not just when it's Christmas, right? So now we're in December, right? You do have people that want to go to church because it's Christmas. It's like, yeah, but if we're religious or we care about those things, like who are we those other 364 days out of the year? So I'm completely like, I don't want to say hands off, but like not religious. And I would consider myself spiritual, and that's okay.
Absolutely. And what I heard a lot of what you say, not a lot of what you say, but what I focused in on what you said was hypocrisy.
Yes.
The pastor behaving inappropriately, probably while he was preaching just the opposite from whatever pulpit he was standing at. Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going alphabetically, so I'm going to go Christy next. What's been your experience?
I was raised Catholic. My husband was raised Catholic. All of our families were Catholic. Like, we have just the deepest roots of Catholicism. And my grandmother, we always kind of joked and said she was going to like go up on the rapture with Jesus. Like, it was just really strong beliefs poured into your head. And I remember in college hanging out with friends that were not Catholic and sharing that with my grandmother, like that I went to a Church of Christ service or something on Sunday, and she was like, "What, you know how like Southern people say, like, clench my pearls," like offended that I would go to a non-Catholic church. And I just didn't see anything wrong with it. I didn't understand what was wrong with going and talking and hearing different perspectives. I was so curious to just understand some of these things. And then, of course, over the years have just pulled away more and more from religion, and stepping into just that, like that connection, Brenda, that you were talking about, just not needing to go into a group of people to be told what to believe or what to think, but really to just kind of make my own, have like my own moral compass type of thought. And this, I mean, I know we've talked a lot about like Catholic guilt. I'm sure anybody that's been around a Catholic knows Catholic guilt. It's like, it's just like born in you or something. But a lot of my friends, and because my children went to a Catholic school, a lot of their friends and, you know, our circle of people are still practicing Catholics. And I notice a lot of like judgment from my own self. Like when I hear them say things like about going to church on Sundays as a perfect example, I find myself having this like inner conversation, like I'm a bad person because I'm not going to church. And it's like, but you do church every day, you know, like every day is my moral compass. And that whole like 365 days of, maybe I don't like live like Jesus, but right, like I feel like I live in love. Like that's my intention. That's like my mantra. And I mean, it could just be the story that I tell myself, but that feels more real and genuine than any time I ever stepped into that church and heard somebody preach to me about words that I didn't even understand, or yelled at my children before we walked into the church. And, you know, like everybody has to be prim and proper. And yeah, so I would say more spiritual, less religious. And my children are 14 and they did go to a Catholic school, but I found myself not parenting them like you have to believe their ways. It was like, what did you learn and what do you think? That's probably my little spin in my family, is just trying to allow for curiosity and their own self-expression. Like my son chose to not be confirmed, which is like the traditional, like last, what do you call it, sacrament? And he chose to not be confirmed, and my daughter did. And my family did not understand that. They were like, why would he not be confirmed? And like,
or why wouldn't you make him go through
yeah,
it?
right. I'm like, that's his choice. And there were some family members that like kind of, oh, okay, like kind of went along with it. But in my story, I hear the judgment of like, that's wrong. But I'm okay with it. My husband was okay with it. My son's okay with it. So yeah.
And that works for you.
Yeah.
Tanya, what's your experience?
I just have to throw in I have to go off the rails for just a second and throw in, I love this dynamic at the moment, because it's like we invited the projector to be sort of like the lead facilitator of this conversation this month. And I know you said you were going alphabetical, but as you were talking and getting ready to open it up to the rest of us, I was like, please choose Erin first. Please choose the generator first, because her strategy is to respond, and the manifest generators will just be like, da, 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 da. So I love that it worked out that way, whether that was your intention, consciously or unconsciously. It's beautiful. My experience with religion, like Christy, I was raised Catholic. My grandmother was a practicing Catholic, relatively practicing. She sure practiced in the "you're a sinner, you need to go to church." She sure practiced in telling me all the things that I was doing wrong. And my mom, my mom never forced us to go to church or forced me to go to church, but my grandmother would. I would go to mass with her on Sunday mornings, and occasionally during the holidays. We didn't usually go on Wednesdays, but I had a lot of difficulty from the get-go, because also, similar to Christy, my religion, my practice has been love. I was writing in my diary at like 8-9 years old. I had a Garfield diary. It was super cute. But I was writing in there about love and acceptance, and that belonging. Like, we all just want to belong to something. Brenda, that really resonated when you were saying, oftentimes religion is this way to belong to something. It's this way to be connected to others. And I deeply wanted that. But the biggest problem that I had, that came out pretty early, actually, for me, was once my mom had told me that she was a lesbian, it was at a time where I was very confused by, like, I would go to Sunday school, or I would go to Sunday school with friends. So I was exposed to Christianity. I was exposed to the Catholic religion. And what I had a hard time with was, you were created in his image. And I'm like, well, if we were created in his image, how is it that there's something that's wrong with us? How is it that we're bad? He gave us free will because he has free will. So how is it that when we explore and express that free will, that we're somehow now bad and wrong and sinners? And all of the fear that came with that, all of the, you're not going to go to heaven, you're going to go to hell, all these bad things are going to happen to you if you don't conform. So just that whole, like, you were made in his image, which is out of love. Like, God loves you. Well, if God loves me, why did he make my mom a lesbian that is basically being told that she's an abomination? It just, it didn't make any sense to me. And I was pissed off. I was pissed off at religions that were saying, you're bad, you're wrong, you have no worth, you have no you have no place in this world. I just could not abide by that. And so, yeah, I was a bit of a rebel. I got myself in trouble. I was thinking about it this morning when I was doing my contemplation and movement practice, and I was remembering like all the times that I might be sitting watching TV and my hands in my lap, totally, innocently. And my grandma, what are you doing?
Mm.
Are you touching yourself? You're not supposed to do that.
Mm.
Like, I'm a kid. Like,
Mhm.
what else am I going to do? You know?
And it was designed to feel good, by the way. Like,
Yes.
hello.
Yeah. But it was like, I'm not even touching myself, but just the fact that my hands were stuffed down in, I was probably just trying to stay warm because I'm always cold.
Mhm.
The times that she told me, you need to go to church because you're a sinner and you need to ask for, forgiveness. You need to go into confession and all of that kind of stuff. I was like, yeah, I'm not having any of this shit.
And
I was,
not that, sorry, Tanya, I wanted to say something.
go ahead.
I was going to say, and not that no one can make us feel shame, but as a child, you said fear, right? But also very much shameful, right? Like
For sure.
shaming to get us to behave how they want us to behave and conform, which I think is the exact opposite of stories I've heard through Jesus. And you know what I mean? It's just like,
Mm.
and also, yeah, just the strong shame. And it, like Brenda touched on, it's just the hypocrisy, right? It's like, do as I say, not as I do.
Mm-hmm.
I think religion teaches a lot of us to be liars about who we are, what we've done, what we've said, what we think, right?
How we
and
feel
it's
in our
either,
hearts.
yeah, shove it down to in order to belong, shove it down or else you're not going to fit.
Mhm.
And that's just, I read an article on Psychology Today that says that's where mental issues start happening, is when you're trying to conform and you're trying to live within those parameters and you shove it down and shove it down and shove it down, and you're not being true to your authentic self. Like you said, you couldn't understand it. You were trying to figure out how it worked. At some point you wanted to belong, but you couldn't get beyond the gap, right?
Yeah. And since then I have explored and encountered other religions that I actually like, yeah, I can get behind this. I've been very curious about different religions or ways of worshiping or being spiritual and connected. Um, and so, I have actually found some religions that are much more closely aligned with my spiritual beliefs that I have now. Um, I even remember one of my nail clients actually, she was talking about her church at one point in time, and I don't remember what particular, if it was a denomination or if it was just an open Christian type of church, but she was like, gay, lesbian, like we welcome everybody into our church. And we've had extensive studies on the Bible and realizing that there's this human interpretation, also this not only are we humans interpreting words, but language has changed so much over the years, like the meaning that we're giving certain things and how it could be interpreted then, and how like it was written, it was interpreted from energy into words through, so yeah, I find myself in this place of just really being very, very spiritual and um, very connected to that now, whereas before I was pissed off and angry. So that's where I'm at.
Mhm.
Isn't it
good.
interesting though that the very thing that tries to bring us together is what may sometimes, it's like the separation, right? I mean, we all talk about like we all might have started, whether we did it or our parents, right, to come together, and then the separateness that it can
I think it's a divider. I think it's totally a divider. Because if I say, I'm Christian, you're Jewish, they're Islamic, there's a connotation behind saying those things and what that means. Are they lesser than you because they're not believing the same way you do?
Right.
We're all, I mean, we all, four of us agree for sure. We're all just humans, right? And we are all about love and wanting to be loved. But I think it's a way to divide. I really, really do. Whether or not you believe, like Christy, or no, it was Aaron, sorry, my apologies, where you said one of your parents had to convert in order to be accepted to be married in the church. That's a dividing thing, right? Why can't the religions coexist? If the two, chose to remain in their own religions and do what I personally did, was get married by a justice of the peace, and you have children, what's the next question? Which way are you raising them?
Yep.
Right? Another divider. Are you going to raise them Jewish? Are you going to raise them Christian? Are you going to raise them Catholic? Are you going to raise them Muslim? What are you going to, what's the right word I want to put out there? What values, what morals are you going to put out for your kids? What religious teachings and requirements are you going to put on them? So to me, I don't like it just for the fact that it divides people in and of itself, right? Because it's like, it's a label. And Christy, I know how much you love labels, right? But labels divide, and sometimes for a positive reason and sometimes not. How many wars have been fought between different religious organizations and things like that. But it's all just man, right? It's all just man.
And I think it's like back to that, the interpretation too, because I'm observing, I work with families of a lot of different ethnicities and religious beliefs. And I have friends that have, I don't even know what you would call it. Like, like one Jewish, one Catholic, one Jewish, one Christian. I don't know what you would, what's the word
Mixed
there,
faith.
but yes, that's a great, thank you. And it doesn't appear that there's a choice. It's like we're teaching them about Judaism, right? Is that the word, Judaism? And then we're teaching them about Christianity. And I think like, oh, that's interesting. And then maybe the child I've never even asked them, and maybe I will, but it's like they're maybe allowing their children to make their own decision. But how I found it to be really fascinating that there is this opportunity now where it doesn't have to be like a either or, it's an and.
Yeah.
Right.
Or none.
Or a none. Yeah.
Or something entirely different that resonates with them. Yeah. I totally love the idea of being able to explore and not being restricted in what you're allowed to explore. Right.
Because what's the impetus under all of it? We want to be good humans. Right? We want to feel safe. We want to belong. And we want to feel like we're loved, and we have the freedom to express who we are. But that fear comes up. And I think that that's where a lot of people are like, nope, you either have to believe this or you have to believe this. Sorry, Brenda, please.
No.
Please continue.
No. Well, I wanted to point out see if it sparks any conversation. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But I went through a list of things that I thought might be common beliefs among different organizations, right? And then you can tell me, interrupt me at any time. I'll pause between my little bullets. And I'm sorry, I did make a list because that's how I operate. Sorry.
You don't have to apologize for being you.
No, it's all good. So common beliefs in religion. The first and foremost would be the number and gender of gods that they believe in. Right? A lot of what our pasts have been exposed to is a singular God that may or may not have a son or an equal or part of a trinity, whatever that is for you. But there are other religions that worship women, that worship animals, that worship multitudes of which, but within their own organizations, they've come up with a common theme for their followers, right? And so sometimes for those of us who were raised or have exposure with certain ones, the thoughts of another are totally foreign to us. Right? And therefore, the way I've been taught to believe, if it's not like me, it's wrong. Right? Or it's judged. I'm not going to say wrong, but it's at least judged, because a lot of what religion does is say our way or the highway. Right? It doesn't allow for that exploration of maybe there is a goddess out there that is just as equal or just as important as the one that, the God and the Jesus that's been in my life, but I'm totally unaware because I've never been exposed to that. And it's actually been restricted for me. That's just the theme that I see.
And evolutionarily, that makes complete and total sense, because we've talked about this before, that right means to be certain. There's a false sense of safety in certainty, versus wrong is uncertain. It didn't work this way, or it isn't quite this way. So if I'm wrong, there's uncertainty and there's no safety in that. At least that is the old evolutionary way of how our brains, how our humans work. Right. So that's why I think some of these wars happen, is because there is such intense fear and belief that our way is the right way and you must conform. Like, I'm actually afraid for your safety. And I know that my way must be right, because that's where I have certainty and that's where I have safety.
Absolutely. The next bullet I wrote down is leadership's connection or relationship with those gods, which is followed then by my individual relationship. Am I allowed to have a personal relationship with my gods, goddesses, spirit animals, whatever it is that I connect with? Or must I go through a process of attaching to them? And can I be detached from them by my behaviors? The right, wrong thing. What is the relationship? Like, Aaron, you were talking about that pastor. Is his relation, I'm just bringing it up because it's an example, right? Is his relationship still stable with the God that he believes in when he is found out to be wrong or sinning or whatever word they wanted to do it, versus did he lose that as an organization? Did he lose that personally? Can he be forgiven? Can he come back? Or is it an all or nothing thing? How judgmental is that organization we're in based on relationships? Okay. The next one I came up with is what you must do or perform to be in good graces with those gods.
Reminds me of a frat party.
Right?
You want to join the sorority?
What's it called? Hazing?
Nobody's telling me what to do.
I totally understand. And this is where we are now, right? But where did we come from as children and getting to this point?
It's funny. Go ahead. No, I was just gonna say, it's so funny you say that, because I remember, and this might be obviously my mom's programming from her growing up, but it was I always said facade, right? Like, we had to dress up and we had to do the thing. And I just would always question, so there's me and how I, want to always question, but also it's like, but who are we doing this for? And and even Grace
like
in
a mask. You
put
that mask on.
Aren't we just all accepted, going back to humans, right? Like, aren't we all just humans that want to come together and want to, work on ourselves or be in the presence of whatever it is that why you're coming, right? Why you want to come. Why can't we just be accepted as how we are? Why do we have to look and dress a certain way? And isn't that another way that we could, separate ourselves? Because if you don't, dress or look the way that they might want you to look, or so I always just found it so this just doesn't make any sense. Like, we are saying one thing and then we're doing the exact opposite. And I know you used, hypocrisy, but it's just like, why can't we just be, and you said this earlier, but the judging, it's like, it's not our place. Like, I've always felt that way. Like, it is not my place to tell you what you should or should not do. with your life. And yet, I think there's like laundry lists of like, you should be confirmed. You should go to a Catholic school. You should not have sex before you're married. You should not, it's just like
all the shoulds, all the shoulds. And I feel like it's like you climb the ladder of proving. It's like the children are proving to their parents, right? And then the parents are proving to their community, and then the community's proving. It's like you get lost in it. You're right. It's like there is no, even, it's like there's no individuality even. It's just like this.
It's very discouraged.
Yeah. And it's like I don't want to say cult mentality, but right, it kind of is, because there is no individual thinking or even like space for your opinion.
And if you have one, don't share it.
Definitely not. You are not safe.
Because individuality is a wild card. Like if we cannot predict or pigeonhole someone into a certain conforming space, then there is absolutely a lack of safety. If you're not conforming, you are a wild card. And if you're a wild card, there is no safety.
Or I'm like, here comes my trigger right now with my son. You're the bad kid, right? Like you're the bad egg. Like something's wrong.
Yep.
So interesting.
The next one I pulled out was your place in the hierarchical structure of the organization. There's a place for children. She's a no.
I'm a no.
But it's a topic, so let me share it.
I'm like, I want to hear this because I don't think I've ever, go on, Brenda.
So my experience is children should be seen and not heard, especially in church, right? And for me, we never had a Sunday school that we could go off to. So the parents had to sit with the children, and the children were constantly being reprimanded for fidgeting. You couldn't bring any toys to play with. It was very, very structured. You were expected to behave. Taking that up the next level for me, as a woman, I have no place, right? I'm supposed to be subservient to my husband, to the leaders of the church, to the organization. I have I will say the word, I have no value as far as that organization is concerned, except for my obedience and compliance and support of the men in the world, in the organization, in my life. And that's where I'm going at, from where children are versus a woman versus a man versus the organizational leadership versus the organizational structure as a whole. For me, that's a trigger for me, because being a woman, I don't like being told I have no place. I'm a no for you too, Erin. I'm just saying, because I'm with you on that. That's one of my personal triggers. Like, I could never, at least in my organization, could never hold a place of leadership. Not that I necessarily wanted or needed one, but there was no place for that.
You're saying that if you were a woman, you could never be a pastor or a preacher. Am I hearing that?
Not in that organization.
Not in that religion.
No.
You are blowing my mind right now.
I'm like, what?
I never even knew. I'm like, of course, like you could never be a priest in the Catholic religion, because priests are only men.
You could be a nun, but what's the role of a nun?
How could I have never, ever, ever realized that was a patriarch, right? Patriarch?
Yeah.
Isn't that the right word? Holy cow, that is blowing my mind. Because I did grow up in the generation of a church that did have like Sunday service, and there were even some priests that would come up to us when our children were so unruly, the bad kids. And one, I remember Father Jim, he was the nicest human. He came up and he said, "Ma'am, this is just your children participating in church." And I was like, thank you. Like, just so much relief as a mom, because you're just trying to do all the things, right? Like, you're just trying to do everything and do it right. And you just feel like everybody's looking at you when they're crying. And I'm bored to death. Of course, the kids are bored to death. So I didn't have that kids are seen and not heard. And I maybe never even had the desire to even think of myself as a leader in that facility. But I'm like, of course, there's never been women. Holy cow.
No,
I didn't say it's just
so,
that's something that triggers
so
for me, right?
wild. It's so wild. But now I have, like, my children went to a Baptist church for preschool, and that was led 100% by women. Right? Like,
Organizations have changed over time, but
yeah,
primarily in the past, it's all been men.
so
And there are
wild.
some churches, some organizations, some faiths where women are the end all be all, right? Have those leadership positions, but mine didn't allow for it. There were things I could do, but it was of service, right? It wasn't of leadership.
That's
Crazy.
so consistent with a lot of the, I think some of the older religions too, is that, like, if you talk to certain people in my family, they're like, oh, it's him.
Oh, yes. Yes.
It's him.
Yeah.
And I'm
Him
like,
as in
well,
God doing something, like in charge of, okay.
like, he's in charge, his
yeah.
will, his, like, he is the leader here. And I'm like, God's non-binary. Right. Of course, I'm there now. There was a time where I was just like too busy being pissed off at him. Like this, the proverbial him. I find it interesting. Two things I'm wanting to point out in observation that I find interesting. So on my screen, I know that Erin, you're the one doing the recording, but on my screen, I have the two power people are on top, and I'm laughing because Christy and I are underneath, and the love people are just like holding up the power people.
We're just lifting you up.
Just lifting you up. But, and then crosswise, I have myself and Brenda, and then Erin and Christy. And I'm giggling because I was also thinking, like, Brenda and I, you and I are very close in age, whereas Erin and Christy are a little closer in age. And I had that same children are to be seen and not heard. And the experience I had with Sunday school was not in the Catholic religion. It wasn't until later with some friends, they're like, hey, you want to go to our Sunday? And I was like, okay, sure. But very much that hierarchy of men over women, all over children. Like there was no consideration for children. And I personally now find that so ironic because children are the closest things, in my eyes, children are the closest things to pure godliness, goddess, God, godliness there is, right? They have just come from the source. So how could they be wrong in any way?
Of course, I'm reading The Wolf Pack by Abby Wambach. I don't know if you all have read this, but it's talking about the wolves reclaiming society, and like the women are the wolves that are reclaiming society. I'm like, of course. And we like naturally give birth to children, like figuratively and literally, I guess. Well, maybe that's not a figurative. Maybe it is only a literal. Right?
I was reading something about the divine feminine and divine masculine, and I had said something about divine masculine to a friend a year or so ago, and he's like, I've never heard of that. And I'm like, neither have I, but it just came out of my mouth. And then I was reading something recently talking about the expression of the divine feminine and divine masculine, like seeing the yin and the yang. We have both of them within us. And so I just love this idea of reconnection back to our masculine and our feminine, our God and our goddessness. Right? Anyway, Brenda. Let me.
Back to the list.
Back to the list. So the next item on my list is individual attitudes towards both the local organization leadership and then the organization as a whole. So Christy, in your world, it would be the priest versus the Pope, right? So your attitudes towards that, your attitudes towards others in your relationship. And I'm going again with the women must be subservient to men theory that a lot of them espouse. How you're supposed to behave and act towards fellow members of the organization. How you're supposed to act to those who are outside of your faith. Are you supposed to ignore them, shun them, proselytize to them? What are you supposed to do? And the attitudes towards children, right? Are you supposed to bend them to the will of the organization because that's the expectation? Are you allowed to make them curious, like Christy said? Are you stuck in those things? So attitudes is the next one. It's like, okay, what facade are you putting on today for whom?
Wow. Lots of shoulds is what it sounds like.
Right? Isn't it?
Expectations.
And then, go ahead.
I was going to say, this is when my hippie peace love for all the humans comes out. And I just want to be like, screw that. Let's just all be humans together and love each other and find the amazingness in each and every child, animal, earth. Yeah.
Everything. It kind of brings me back to like the foundation of the Who University. It's like when we focus on who we are being, it's less on the doing. And like just listening to that list, I can like envision so much of that in my reality and thinking so many people are worried about like judging or condemning or convincing, which is like outward thinking, right? Mm-hmm. And they're forgetting their own being, like their judgment of others is distracting them from their being of their own, whatever, spirituality, religion, whatever.
Yep. All outward judgment is really self-judgment. It's that.
Catholicism at its best.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe it's all religion. I don't know. I just feel like I speak Catholic guilt.
And judgment, right? Because it's all about judging.
Judgment and shame. Like they could, like, I think they funded all of Brene Brown's research.
Yeah, for sure.
She should thank the Catholic religion just for her work.
This next one may set people off. So I say that in advance. Maybe it doesn't.
Trigger warning.
I'm like, I'm already a no.
Erin, you can continue being your no, but the people are stuck in these ways. And the reason I'm bringing all these up is to recognize patterns that have been ingrained upon you that might be patterns you want to choose to break or not recognize you need to break them or if you want to break them, what it is that you need to break away from. Right?
I'm only kidding, right?
Absolutely.
I'm only kidding. But like what I was telling Christy earlier today too, is like, whether it's money or it's religion or it's sex or it's our health, or it's only a portal to be like, to get in, to be like, where are we stuck? And why can't we change to come back to who we really are? So, I know I'm only playing, but I'm just like, no, all of that.
Megan Trainor comes up. My number is no.
My name is no.
My sign is no.
Perfect.
Okay,
so I call this next one Outlooks on Life, and it's got a lot of subtopics. So I wrote things like what medical options you're allowed to have, what you can or cannot wear or do with your hair. There are certain organizations out there that limit what women can wear, whether or not you can cut your hair, how you cut your hair, things like that, who you can associate with, who you can marry, family planning.
What does that mean? Let's not beat around the bush. What are we talking about? Family planning.
We're talking about
birth control
and making
birth
babies
control,
or not making babies.
Making babies, not making babies, abortions, all those things that have to do with family planning. Politics. There are certain organizations that tell you how you should vote and how you should behave in the political arena based on their beliefs, right? And free thinking is not one of those options. So, I mean, there are all kinds of things that could come up. That was my list of things that came up. Again, Christy, to your point, lots of shoulds, showing up in there. And people choose to live in accordance with those regulations, even though it seems stupid to me. A woman must wear a dress. Why?
This is taxing for me at times, and I'm learning, like everyday learning, but I have children that I work with. Some are medically fragile, and we have a lot of modern day science, right? That, I mean, doctors in medicine can keep babies alive and lots of miracles can happen. There are some religions that choose not to partake in modern day science. And when I was first encountered with families that were refusing care, I didn't understand it. I was like, what do you mean? Like, why wouldn't you choose this? And I'm finding myself with more experience and more exposure to just be really curious now. I don't notice as much judgment will come up occasionally, but it's more like, oh, that's interesting that you think that. Tell me more about it. And the faith that is present in that, I mean, it's like solid foundation, like their faith is not wavering ever. I don't always understand it. I'm not even there to agree with it, right? Like that's not my space. But it is just interesting to watch in my journey of working with other religions, how my perspective has shifted and allowing just the conversation to exist. And because I go at it with curiosity, they share everything with me. Like at first they're like, oh, you're just this person. And then I'm like, wait a second, just tell me about it. And then they just like spill their guts. And they'll even tell me, like, we don't talk to Americans about our beliefs. Some of these are non-American families, some of them are, but yeah, it's just really fascinating to me to just kind of see it from a space like it's not about me. I'm not God, right? I'm not their God for sure. But yeah, it's like, it's not about agreeing with them. It's just about like hearing them and being curious. Like, it's just humanity, right?
I have something.
Go ahead. I was going to give my experience, but I can wait.
I was just going to say, I have more on the, like, where is God that I want to explore. So Brenda, if you want to note that down for this month, like, where do we find God? Where is God? That's definitely a topic that I want to expand on in some of our next sessions. And also, Christy, just wanted to know, I love that you look at things with curiosity, because there's always going to be two sides of the coin, and like examining the belief and faith component and how that comes up. Because Lewis Howes, he has a great podcast for anybody listening to, and he comes from that faith-based religion that we don't need outside medical intervention. And I've also had the experience of knowing people that were in that religion that said no outside medical intervention, and they've had children die or they've had experiences happen, and then the rest of the world has vilified them for their faith and their beliefs. But also there have been miracles or things that have happened that are unexplainable by our current level of science, like not talking about quantum, but our current levels of science about medicine and healing and how that intermingles with our faith and our beliefs. So I just wanted to kind of slip that out there. Please continue, Brenda. And I think Erin had something to say, actually.
Yeah. I was going to ask, I'm so curious of like, is the belonging, is that desire so strong that are we willing to, disconnect is the only word that comes up, but like, are we willing to forgo what we truly want? Like, let's just say, like
Sacrifice.
with your example, Christy, you know, my baby really needs a surgery. And in my heart, I don't know if this is the case, right? But just as an example, in my heart, I want my baby to live, but my faith says this. And so that disconnection from ourselves, right? Like we want to belong so much to that tribe, right? If we're talking like that, we do things that maybe we may not even be aware of. Obviously it's because of the faith, but like, because we don't want, that is a stronger pull to us than in that moment, ourselves, our family, whatever it might be. Which might go back to hierarchy, right?
I love this question. And I'm even curious if one of the moms that I'm working with right now might allow me to have that conversation with her, because her daughter is a DNR, a do not resuscitate. And there's some rather critical situations occurring in her care. My first thought when you were saying that is that they are so focused on their belief and their faith that they're not attuned to their heart. Mm-hmm. So anything of their heart is not even, it's like whispers, right? It's like they don't even hear it because they know that this is like the words are the things that they believe. It is
religious and not spiritual.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I be devil's advocate here for a second and stir some shit up?
Of course.
Sure.
It could be that that's how they're saying it, that there might be that, like, this is what my faith tells me, and so I'm not listening to their heart. It also very possibly could be that they are so in tune with their hearts and their beliefs that they are allowing their child to have the experience that their child came here for and that they may have even been looking for as parents. And that could be a child that only grows to a certain age. And how is my life experiencing that and being truly present and honoring of this being that has come to be? Like, we judge death. We judge death as being wrong if it's happening to a child, if we perceive it as suffering, versus like sometimes, oh, well, they've had a good life, so it's time for them to go. But what is the meaning of their life? So when you were saying that, I was thinking quite possibly it could be, and maybe for some people, the experience that they're having is, I don't really completely believe this. And I feel a fear to step away from my faith. And other people may actually really be connected to that in their hearts and believing that what they're doing is the right thing in this particular situation. And they are actually connected within for that.
That really resonates because there is no, like, I'm not witnessing any anxiety, worry, fear. Like, it has been a little shocking. This is a very fresh, like, current situation. So I'm like relating to this one particular story, but that's such an interesting observation.
I think I totally get what, like, there's two sides to every coin, right? And what, for me, what I was thinking of is like, how many times, and this goes back to whatever portal it is, right? But how many times are we doing something because we feel like we should be, versus from a desire of what's in our heart? And like what Tanya's saying, and then you have where, you know what, it's not my place to decide what happens to my kid, and letting in that surrender and feeling so good about that, and letting that be, where we are too.
And each individual, right? Like there is also that possibility that each individual has their own interpretation or perspective or experience. So
And just because we have science doesn't mean we have to use it, right? Like it's just all of these judgments we go back to, right? Like, oh, well, we have it now, we should use it. And I know we're going off on science versus religion, but it's like, you know, so many times it's like, but what if, who's to say, you know? It goes back to
human body
right?
healing itself.
Yeah.
Ironically, this child is making all kinds of miraculous changes, and it's like without scientific intervention, you know.
It would be interesting also if, I mean, I know we've got a few more weeks of talking about religion to actually explore that science and religion piece. I had heard it once said that that religion allowed science to come in to like study the human body, and that was where that separation occurred. Like the mind and the faith was taken over by the Department of Religion, and the human body was taken over by science and medicine, and the two like oftentimes don't play nice together. So I would love to explore that a little bit more too.
That would be an interesting conversation.
I see science as very much being also related to godliness. If our energy is what has us alive, the beating of our heart, that energy that's beating our heart, and energy cannot be created or destroyed, it can only change form. There's some God and some science. There's some, you know, there's some interweaving of those two things, science and religion. So, and I know that we're at time. So
yeah, this was awesome. Good. I really enjoyed this, and I think I hope everybody else has enjoyed the conversation. And thank you for allowing me to facilitate.
I love that we just got to really just talk about this openly. I think that so many times this conversation doesn't get discussed for fear of hurting other people's feelings and not feeling safe to speak up about what your belief or your experience is. So I just love that we're focusing on this month and maybe being an example of love and openness and
belonging,
curiosity, belonging. Yeah.
And humans.
Judgment
free.
Judgment free. Yeah. I look forward to your list for next time, Brenda.
Yeah. Yeah. So until next week.
Okay. Until next week. Bye.